Once upon a time, in a land called Uz, there lived a wonderful man named Job. He was a very good person. He always tried to do what was right and honored God in everything he did. Job was also a very wealthy man, perhaps the greatest in all the East. He had a large and happy family that he loved very much. He was the proud father of 7 sons and 3 daughters. They would often gather for big feasts and enjoy their time together, filling their home with laughter and joy. Job loved his children dearly and always prayed for them, asking God to keep them safe and to forgive them if they had done anything wrong. His heart was full of love for his family and for God. Job's riches were truly vast, a sign of great blessing in those ancient times. He owned thousands of animals that roamed his lands. Imagine having 7,000 sheep grazing in green pastures and 3,000 camels ready for long journeys across the desert. He also had 500 pairs of oxen to plow his fields, and 500 donkeys to help with all the work. A great number of servants worked for him, helping to manage his household and his livestock. Everyone knew of Job's incredible wealth, but more importantly, they knew of his kind and generous spirit. He was respected by everyone around him for his integrity and his faithfulness. His life was peaceful and full of blessings, a reward for his upright character. Job did not take his good fortune for granted. Every day, he remembered to thank God for all the good things he had. His faith was not just something he talked about, it was something he lived. He was a shining example of a man who was both prosperous and pious. His neighbors looked up to him and his family felt secure under his loving care. Job's world was a picture of perfect harmony, where faith, family, and fortune all came together beautifully. He could not imagine his life being any different from this wonderful existence. The story of Job, however, was about to take a very unexpected turn. In the heavens, a conversation was taking place that would change Job's life forever. Satan, an accuser, came before God and suggested that Job was only faithful because he had been given so many wonderful things. Satan believed that if all of Job's blessings were taken away, Job would surely turn his back on God and curse him. God, knowing the true depth of Job's faith, allowed Satan to test him. God permitted Satan to take away everything Job owned, but he was not allowed to harm Job himself. This heavenly challenge set the stage for a great test of one man's unshakable belief. One day, terrible news began to arrive at Job's home, one disaster after another. A messenger ran to Job, out of breath, and told him that raiders had stolen all his oxen and donkeys and had killed the servants who were with them. Before Job could even process this shocking loss, another messenger arrived. This second man brought even more devastating news. He said that a fire had fallen from the sky and had burned up all of Job's 7,000 sheep and the shepherds who were tending to them. Job's heart grew heavy as he listened, his mind struggling to understand what was happening to him on this dreadful day. The wave of tragedy was not over yet. A third messenger rushed in, his face pale with fear. He reported that another group of raiders had carried off all 3,000 of Job's camels and had killed the servants who were with them. Job had now lost almost all his great wealth in a matter of moments. But the worst news was yet to come, a blow that would shatter his world completely. A fourth and final messenger stumbled before him, weeping. He told Job that a powerful wind had swept in from the desert and had caused the house where his children were feasting to collapse. All 10 of his beloved children were gone. In the face of this unimaginable sorrow, Job's reaction was truly remarkable. He stood up, tore his robe as a sign of his deep grief, and shaved his head to show his mourning. But then, he did something extraordinary. He fell to the ground, not in anger or despair, but in worship. He said, "The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." Even after losing everything he held dear, his animals, his servants, and all his precious children, Job did not sin by blaming God. His faith, though tested by the deepest pain a person can endure, did not break. He held on to his belief in God's goodness. But the test was not finished. Satan went before God again and argued that Job remained faithful only because his own health was untouched. Satan claimed that if Job suffered physically, he would surely curse God. So, God allowed Satan to afflict Job's body, but his life had to be spared. Soon after, Job was struck with painful sores that covered him from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. He sat in ashes, scraping his skin with a piece of broken pottery, in constant agony. His own wife, seeing his misery, told him to curse God and die. But Job replied, "Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" 3 of Job's friends heard about all the terrible things that had happened to him. Their names were Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. They decided to travel together to visit Job to comfort him and show him sympathy. When they arrived and saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize their friend. He was so changed by his sickness and his grief that they were completely shocked. They began to weep loudly, tore their own robes, and sprinkled dust on their heads to share in his sorrow. For 7 days and 7 nights they sat on the ground with Job in complete silence, because they saw that his suffering was too great for words. After the 7 days of silence, Job finally spoke. He did not curse God, but he did curse the day he was born. He expressed his deep anguish and confusion, asking why he had to endure so much pain. This started a long series of conversations between Job and his 3 friends. His friends had their own ideas about why Job was suffering. They believed that God is always just and that people only suffer when they have done something wrong. They tried to convince Job that he must have sinned secretly, and that if he would just admit his wrongdoing, God would forgive him and make him well again. Job listened to his friends, but he did not agree with them. He insisted that he was innocent. He knew in his heart that he had not done anything to deserve such terrible punishment. This made the debates very long and difficult. Job argued that sometimes bad things happen to good people, and it is not always a simple case of punishment for sin. He felt lost and abandoned by God, yet deep down, his faith still flickered. At one point, even in his pain, he declared, "I know that my Redeemer lives," showing that he still had hope, even when he could not understand his situation at all. The conversations went on and on, with each friend taking a turn to speak and Job responding to them. They were trying to help, but their words often felt more like accusations than comfort. They could not imagine any other reason for such calamity except for some hidden fault in Job's character. Job, in turn, grew frustrated with their simple answers to his very complex and painful questions. He longed for a chance to speak directly to God to ask why this was happening. He maintained his integrity, refusing to lie and confess to sins he had not committed, holding fast to his truth through all the pain and confusion. After the long and tiring debates with his friends were over, something amazing happened. God himself answered Job. He spoke not in a quiet whisper, but from a powerful whirlwind, a storm of wind and cloud. God did not give Job a simple explanation for his suffering. Instead, he asked Job a series of questions. He asked Job where he was when God created the world. He asked if Job could command the morning, or if he understood the secrets of the sea and the stars. God spoke of his incredible power over all of creation, from the smallest raindrop to the mighty constellations like Orion and the Pleiades. Through these powerful questions, God was teaching Job something very important about wisdom and humility. He showed Job just how vast and complex the universe is, and how limited human understanding can be. God described magnificent creatures like the giant behemoth and the fearsome leviathan, animals that no human could ever tame. By showing Job the greatness of his creation, God helped Job see how small his own perspective was. Job realized that he had been questioning things that were far beyond his ability to comprehend. He had wanted answers, but God was teaching him to trust instead. Humbled by God's mighty words, Job replied, "My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes." He finally understood that he did not need to know the reason for everything. What he needed was to trust in God's wisdom and power, even when life was painful and confusing. After Job spoke, God turned to Job's 3 friends. He was not pleased with them because they had not spoken the truth about him as Job had. God told them to offer a sacrifice and have Job pray for them, and God would forgive them for their foolish words. In the end, after Job prayed for his friends, God restored everything that Job had lost. In fact, God blessed him with twice as much as he had before. He was given 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 pairs of oxen, and 1,000 donkeys. He also had a new family with 7 more sons and 3 more daughters who were known as the most beautiful women in the entire land. Job's final years were filled with peace and joy. He lived for another 140 years, long enough to see his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Job's story teaches us that even in the darkest times, faith and trust in God can lead to incredible blessings.